For June the 16th is commemorated Youth Day, when youngsters in Soweto rose up against Bantu education and were shot and killed by apartheid police. Well, the problems are plentiful, solutions lacking, and of course youth unemployment, one of the biggest scourges in South Africa, depending on who you talk to, between 30 up to 60%, more than 1 in 2 not having a job. To this end, government has promised improvements in 3 broad areas: job opportunities, education and entrepreneurship. With all of this and the many years of existence of the National Youth Development Agency, the NYDA, whose prime focus is on the youth, are they doing enough? Well, to discuss, I'm joined by the Chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency, Sifiso Mtshweni. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Mtshweni.
Thank you very much for having us.
So it is one of our biggest scourges, and I checked again today, and a lot of people unfortunately don't know what the development agency does, how you are helping young people. Is that a failure on behalf of the agency?
Well, not at all. You'd remember that the agency is just over 8 years in existence. Before that, there was 2 institutions, one being the National Youth Commission, the other one being Umsobomvu Youth Fund. And of course, when the 2 came together in 2008, that particular merger obviously had a bit of a bumpy start. Around 2010, I think the agency was also not in the news for the right reasons. But I think over the last few years, the agency has turned a corner because one of the big issues was to fix its own governance issues, ensure that the staff realignments and it gets its priorities right. As we sit here today, we've got a very clear mission in terms of what the agency seeks to achieve. We've got very clear objectives in the main, which is to mainstream youth development across, government, society, and in civil society and in the private sector. And to date, I think we've been running quite a few successful programs that have actually impacted positively on the lives of young people.
So before we get to that, you've alluded to the old claims of corruption.
Yeah.
But this year there was a labour issue. Now, how we're accusing you and other execs of unilaterally raising salaries. Has that issue been resolved so you can focus on the job at hand?
Well, the issue was clarified. The board of directors is appointed by the president. The packages are, handled by the National Treasury. So there's no board that can sit and actually take those decisions. I think what was there was that there has been a restructuring of the organization that took place, which needed to put the salary bill below 35% as required by Parliament. So of course those issues had their own aftermath, with certain employees having to get packages and take early retirement. So out of that particular process, I think somehow Labour sort of found its way into the media and complained about certain things. But I think from where we sit, the agency has gotten clean audits. The last 3 audit opinions have been clean audits, with this year the agency achieving 100% of its key performance areas. So the agency has turned around its operations, and currently it's on full swing in ensuring that it implements its own objectives.
Okay, but then from a public perspective, you look at this and young people are not getting jobs. Some people are getting old before they get a job, even if they've studied. If you look at the last 2 or 3 years, can you tell us what you have achieved, if you have clear targets and clear objectives?
Well, as you started the interview, you did say that there are 3 areas that government as a whole has been looking into. Issues of education, issues of skills development, issues of entrepreneurship. Now, what we've done is that as the NYDA on the education front, as you know, that the country has been going through a lot of challenges, especially where higher education is concerned. The NYDA has launched the Solomon Mahlangu Scholarship Fund. To date, we've taken over 400 young people through the education system. This year, we've seen the first batch of graduates. Next year, another 300 is coming out. We've invested over 86 million in entrepreneurship development. The NYDA actually runs one of the best entrepreneurship model in the country. As you know, other agencies actually give out loans to those young people who want to start businesses. We give out grants, and our grant system has actually been produced 68% of a success rate. So there's always been a view around the funding of the agency itself. We think that it's one of the most grossly underfunded agencies of government. I mean, currently we have a budget of just over 400 million. And yet you speak about 19 million economically active young people in South Africa. In essence, that means that you are spending just over 20 rands, you know, on young people in South Africa. However, we've looked at it differently. We said that youth development is not just an issue that the NYDA deals with. It needs to be mainstreamed across government. When you talk about Department of Basic Education and Higher Education, that's where young people are actually found. When you talk about social development, that's where young people are actually found. Sports and recreation, that's where young people are found. So one of the things that we've been saying to government is say, let's mainstream youth development and let's make sure that all departments actually play their role in ensuring that they uplift young people from the morass that they find themselves
So you will support the different departments?
Well, not just support. I think one of the postures that we've taken now is to say that as an agency we need to be a mouthpiece of young people. We need to raise even the uncomfortable issues. And I'll make an example. You've raised the issue of the high unemployment rate in the country. There's been some interventions that government has made, which in our view we feel that probably we need to take a different approach. And one of the things that we've been raising is that out of the 3.3 million unemployed young people, about 400,000 of them are actually unemployed graduates. I mean, if you go around every street corner, there's an unemployed graduate holding a placard saying, I need a job in this and that. And one of the big issues there, one of the big evils in our view, is that there's this draconian requirement for experience, especially for entry-level jobs. So one of the things that we've raised is to say, if you want to decisively deal with unemployment, one of the things that you need to do is to do away with experience for entry-level jobs. The second issue is to say that 60% of the population of this country is young people under the age of 35. So why is it that when you enter the job market is actually littered with old people? So we need to come up with a quota system. Women have called for 50-50, as young people who are calling for 40% youth representation across all sectors of society, whether in the private sector, whether in government, even in parliament for that matter.
Won't this be a little draconian on companies who need experience? They already, government has tried a whole lot of subsidies for young people. There's this new program, Yes. Why is it not working? Have you looked at the structural issues behind that? Well,
you'd remember that, you know, there has been interventions such as your internship programs. But now the reality is that with those internship programs is that we have young people who are qualified in financial management, in engineering, but when they enter a company, they are sent to go and make coffee, others are sent to go and fetch dry clean. So there's not been an essence of value. And you are right, there has been interventions like the YES program, which seeks to respond to this issue of the experience. However, what we are saying is that for entry-level jobs, we're not convinced that if you're a receptionist, for instance, or if you're an administrator in a company, or you're a clerk or you're a driver, you need 5 years experience. Why would you need 5 years experience to be a receptionist when your job is to pick up phones and transfer the calls to the necessary offices? We've been answering calls our whole lives. So on that particular issue, we don't think that, and we are not convinced that 5 years experience is needed. If you're talking about a driver,
but if there are enough jobs, people with experience and with inexperience will get the jobs. If there's enough skills, those jobs will open up for the majority
the education system in our country has produced 400,000 graduates. There's 400,000 graduates with the necessary skills, because if we say our education system in our country is one of the best in the world, then why is it that we've got the graduates who are sitting at home with their qualifications? Let's get those particular graduates into the job market, and let's not give them piecemeal solutions. Because if you give them 1 year internship, 2 years internships, yes, they get some feel of the job market, but after 2 years they are laid off and they still go back to the unemployed.
Very quickly, because we're running out of time, you said 68%. This is the grant of, I think, 100,000 Rand for entrepreneurships. Yeah. That sounds staggering, because we hear that most startups fail, especially when it's young people involved.
Yeah. Well, the reason why most of these businesses fail within the first 3 years is because when you give an aspiring entrepreneur a grant or a loan, let me say a loan, is that for the first 3 years, they have to spend time paying back the loan rather than making the necessary profit and so on. Now, our model is that we give them a startup capital. We give them a hand up. So a young person has a great idea and says, this is the type of business that I would like to run. We come there, we buy them machinery, we give them the necessary support, and we also give them training, because we don't just give out money, we give them support, we give them mentorship, so that they are able to jump the first cliff, which is the first 3 years. And so far, the program has actually become a success, and we are sponsoring it to other departments to say, here's a good model that they can use to ensure that they uplift SMMEs in our country.
All right, thank you for your time this evening. That was the Chair of the National Youth Development Agency, Sifiso Mtshweni. Bongani.